Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any other fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Brian Moritz. Today's guest is Cyd Zeigler from Outsports.com. Cyd Zeigler, welcome to The Other 51. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you.
First of all, I would normally say, because I know you're a Patriots fan, I would normally offer condolences on the Super Bowl, but I grew up a Bills fan, so I don't know if I can really, in full spirit, give that. But congratulations on the season you guys had and your team had, not like you're on it, and on the Super Bowl, on just really a thrilling Super Bowl. What was it? I'm wondering what it was like from your perspective as a Patriots fan watching that game.
When your team has won as many championships as the Patriots have, it's the Super Bowl becomes an amusement. If they win, that's great. If they lose, you're just happy for the other team.
That's such a wonderful little humble brag to be able to have about your team. That it's kind of a precious.
But it's honest, like that's I really like. I know a lot of Philadelphia Eagles fans, and I remember the first time the Patriots won the Super Bowl and how unbelievably overwhelmed I was, and I can only imagine how happy they are. So, what can I tell you? I mean, they lost. I'm happy for my friends.
And what's always funny about especially when I talk to my students who are 19, 20 years old right now, and they kind of grew up in this era of Patriots dominance. Like, I don't think they obviously weren't alive or don't know how bad the Patriots were for the longest time. It really was kind of it must have felt miraculous, that first win. Not only that you had this franchise that had struggled so much, but also I remember the way that they won that. That must have felt miraculous to you.
The Patriots were a roller coaster. They would go 1-15, and then a couple of years later they'd be in the Super Bowl, and then they'd go 2-14, and it was just it was very inconsistent. They were never great. They were sometimes miserable, but it was certainly always interesting following them before they became this juggernaut.
Right. And one of the other things I want to mention, kind of playing off of the Super Bowl, is of all the great work you've done at Outsports, and we'll certainly get to that in a few minutes here, you are the one sports writer I've read in the entirety of the internet who consistently and eloquently, I must say, defends the NFL catch rule.
So, I'm a high school and college football official, and I've had lengthy conversations with Dean Blandino and Al Riveron, and if you sit down and you study the rule and you really listen to why it is written the way it is, why possession in 2 feet is not enough to be a catch, you start to realize all this nonsense about, they need to take the rule and crumple it up and throw it in the trash, and Roger Goodell saying we need to start over from scratch. They're going to keep ending up in the same place for various reasons. But unfortunately, people like Chris Collinsworth and just want to sit there and scream at the TV and rile up the fans. It's unfortunate. They don't have an interest in understanding the rule.
Okay, so I will admit I've been one of those people who have loudly screamed at the TV about the catch rule. So help me understand it the way you do from the close reading. Why does the catch rule as currently situated? Why is it right? Why does it make sense? What am I missing?
Well, I think one of the things to think about is, so let's suppose you have, let's take the going to the ground part, okay? You have to survive going to the ground. The reason that is there is so you don't start having all these cheap fumbles. And people say, fumbles are exciting. But a cheap fumble where the guy has possession for a split second, 2 feet on the ground, and then hits the ground and the ball comes out, that a cheap fumble like that doesn't reflect, doesn't reward the better team, rewards the lucky team. So that's why that's there. And some people say, well, there should be a difference if it's on the sideline or at the goal line. The NFL does not want different rules for different spots on the field, right? Well, the back of the end zone, it's one rule, but on the sideline, it's another, and then it's in the middle of the field, it's a third rule. They want one consistent rule because as an official, it's hard enough officiating this rule without having to worry about where on the field you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one part of it.
And I guess the other part, like the general consensus, I think you would hear is one knee equal. You catch it, 2 feet, possession, and that's not enough. Aside from the going to the ground, like I think let's take the Super Bowl for example. The Eagles touchdown, not the go ahead one, but the one where he caught it at the back of the end zone and juggled it. So to my
he didn't juggle it.
Okay,
he didn't juggle it.
Okay,
he never lost possession of that ball. And going to the ground was irrelevant because, I mean, I have to look at it again, but to me, and this is coming from a Patriots fan, to me, he never lost possession of the ball. He was he had the time to become a runner, so he caught the ball in stride,
mm-hmm.
and after he had gotten possession of the ball, 2 feet down, then he got tackled to the ground. So he wasn't going to the ground in the process of making the catch.
Okay.
So to me, and again, I wasn't a catch, but to me that was a catch.
Okay. What about the first kind of controversial one? I guess the one where the catch was made in the back of the end zone, and I forget which player it was, but he caught it, and he the ball shifted in his hands.
Clement,
Clement.
Yeah. No, that's the same guy. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
He didn't lose possession.
Gotcha.
And what I've always been told by people in the NFL, or is if there's a slight shift in his hand, that doesn't necessarily mean loss of possession.
Okay.
If it separates from his hands, then that's loss of possession. But it just shifted in his hand. He didn't lose possession of that ball.
Gotcha. So I actually didn't know you were a football official, or I'd read it and didn't remember it. I'm wondering, because I have conversations on other podcasts that I'm on about media coverage and how media handles questions of refereeing and questions of officiating. And you kind of straddle both worlds as an official and as a sports writer. So I'm wondering, when you, in general, what do you think of, and probably didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but what do you think of media coverage of officials? And as someone who does this, kind of what drives you nuts about how media cover rules questions and officials questions?
For me, there's just a general lack of understanding of officiating and the rules. There was a playoff catch. I can't remember which game it was, but the player going to the ground never had possession of the ball. He never had two hands on the ball. The ball stopped moving before the ball hit the ground. Okay, so the ball hit the ground before he gained possession. That is an incomplete pass, no matter what rule book you look at or what level of football. If the ball hits the ground before you get possession, this is an incomplete pass. And I saw headlines saying, NFL catch rule strikes again. This was not the NFL catch rule. It's not that he had possession and then lost it. He never had possession. And the referee in his announcement said the player never had possession. Yet writers immediately went to, oh, here comes the NFL catch rule again. So everything, so much gets unfairly blamed on the officials and the NFL rulebook. And it's just, that was just a regular old football play. And they deemed it an incompletion. So there just seems to be this, where people don't want to understand it, that they literally will just, over and over again, commentators on NFL Network and ESPN, no one understands what a catch is. That's just not patently true. You have not done your job. You don't understand it. That doesn't mean everybody doesn't. Tim Hasselbeck is actually one of the guys who clearly has tried to understand this, and he at times offers some of the most educated thoughts on the catch rule. So they just need to go educate themselves on officiating and understand it's a lot harder than they think.
Sports writer, football official, website founder. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your career path as a journalist and as a sports writer, and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Well, I was a development executive at Disney Channel back in the late '90s and early 2000s. Some of your students, I'm sure, will recognize some of the shows I worked on, like Hannah Montana and That's So Raven, and oh God, what was that one? Even Stevens. These are probably some of the shows that they grew up watching. And I was gay. I knew I was gay. I had gay friends, and I was a sports fan. And I knew there were a handful of us. And one of them was my best friend, Jim Basinski. We played in the Los Angeles Gay Flag Football League together. And we were just on vacation one summer together, and the internet was becoming a thing. And we just started talking about how there really was no place for gay NFL fans to connect and meet and talk. And so we just decided to start this website called Outsports, where we pretty much just talked about the NFL from what we thought was the perspective of a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, we got kind of discovered by Yahoo, and people started emailing us saying, "Oh well, I'm a gay sports fan. How can I meet other gay sports fans? And why don't you guys talk about the Final Four that's coming up? And I'm a college gymnast who's gay. How can I share my story?" And organically, Outsports started to become much more than what we had originally intended. As a journalist, I never set out to be a journalist. It just kind of fell in my lap, and there was this void in sports coverage. At the time, in the early 2000s, no one in the sports media wanted to talk about gay issues, and no one in the gay media wanted to talk about sports. So we became this place that we were doing this thing that nobody else wanted to do, and of course, now suddenly everybody wants to do it.
Right. I'm wondering about filling that void in the sports coverage, and I was just at lunch talking to my wife about this and about your site, and how I'm wondering how you have seen in general the sports media landscape change since you started the site, not however many years ago it was. And I was telling my wife, like, I think you look at a lot of mainstream sports coverage, ESPN's the exemplar of this, but it's still such a very kind of like hyper masculinized, hyper straight masculine experience. And do you still find that that's the case? Has anything about the general sports environment shifted since you started the site?
Well, the internet, right? Social media has changed so much. People's access to their favorite athletes has transformed, and people don't have to necessarily athletes don't have to go through the media anymore to get their message out. They can just get their message out. So obviously that's been a huge change. But if you're talking from kind of a perspective of gender roles and sexual orientation and gender identity, Barstool Sports has risen in the age of the internet. Deadspin, some of these places that are, bastions of masculinity and machismo and straight heterosexuality, they're flourishing. At the same time, I feel very fortunate to work at a company, SB Nation, that's gone the other direction, that shies away from talking about penises and the hot cheerleaders, and doesn't set out to make sports into this big macho culture. So certainly the internet has given rise to places like Barstool Sports, but it's also given rise to SB Nation, and I think that there's a lot of space for both. And you talk about ESPN. They've created ESPNW, which might not exist without the internet. So there are certainly some good and some, well, it's an interesting choice.
Yeah, and it should be clear, ESPN has, for all the faults and sins we can say about ESPN. They do a lot of great work. ESPN is just such a big company there. You can kind of use them as a monolith, and that's probably inaccurate on my part to say that. In general, I think a lot of people became familiar with your site when Michael Sam came out, and he came out, I believe, he came out on your site. Did you have that first, or did he do that somewhere else?
It was an interesting. So I was advising his team behind the scenes on just what to do, what not to do, just giving them whatever advice I could, helping them however I could. And his team decided that he was going to come out on ESPN and the New York Times. But because I had been advising them that I could write a kind of behind the scenes story on how this all unfolded, and even though the New York Times had quote unquote the coming out interview, and I was kind of flattered that in their year end review that year, their auditor said, "How the hell did this guy get a better story than the New York Times?" So even though he didn't come out on Outsports, we had the better story.
So, I mean, looking back on that from with the distance of a few years, what was that like, both for you, running the site, you personally writing the stories and the coverage about this, and you as a gay man and kind of, as the running this site, kind of as a representative of LGBTQ sports fans? Looking back on that, what stands out to you from that whole experience?
I guess, everything seemed to be going so well until ESPN and Josina Anderson decided before week 3 of the preseason to produce a story about Michael Sam's showering habits with his team. It was inexcusable. There was no reason for it. By then, people weren't even talking about Michael being gay. It was just, making a roster, and it was as though people had almost forgotten about Michael Sam being quote unquote different. And suddenly ESPN and Josina Anderson decided that they wanted to stir shit up. And they published just an inexcusable story. And that just became this turning point in Michael's story, where suddenly just everything became negative. And because the story was about the claim was that he wasn't showering with his teammates or something like this. And then, he ended up getting cut from the Rams, and then he didn't get picked up. And then it was just, that's what I remember, is that everything was amazing. And then it was like this tipping point where everything became negative. As
you were talking, that story kind of came back, and wasn't it something like he wasn't showering with teammates because of like he was making them uncomfortable, or they were like there's some sort of like comfort levels, something like I'm grasping at straws here, but wasn't that like the gist of the story, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. There was this. It was just. I mean, Josina Anderson is. I just have no respect for her, particularly after that story. It was so smarmy and sensationalist. It was just, really, it was not cool. And it's so funny because she, so my response was I went into a shower and I recorded a video of me in a shower, kind of taunting her, about how uncomfortable everyone must be with me in the shower. And she saw me at the Super Bowl that next year. She's like, that was unfair what you did. And I'm like, please stop, go away.
And not only is it such an unfair story, but I mean that, that's, we talk about dog whistles in the media. I mean, that trades on like the most ultimate dog whistle, I think, about gay athletes, right? That image is like that's the one when people want to stoke fear, that's kind of the one they bring up.
Yeah, and it is because it's this gay man, you're looking to rape his teammates in the shower. I mean, it's like if you take the thought process to where its natural conclusion, it's insanity. And we have had athletes write about the shower in thoughtful ways. We ask people to comment on it when it makes sense, and every single one of them says, "Yeah, this is not really a big deal." And there are the occasional gay athlete they just feel a little uncomfortable, and they figure ways around it. But the way that ESPN handled it and the timing of when they handled it was so inappropriate and unnecessary. And it's not a big surprise that it was somebody like Josina Anderson who was the one who did it.
I'm wondering now with a few years, and it's interesting to think about. We had Jason Collins, Michael Sam, Derek Gordon, all come out not in rapid succession, but kind of in a few year window where they were coming out. And we, correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't had any athlete in kind of like the major team sports in the U.S. come out since then. Correct?
Yeah, nobody. Since Michael Sam came out, I mean, literally, you haven't, forget about a current athlete. You've barely had any former athletes. I mean, of players who, were of some significance. I think Ryan O'Callahan in those 4 years is the only current or former athlete. I mean, maybe there were a couple other ones, but, somebody who played in a Super Bowl or played with a team like the Patriots, I think in 4 years has been one.
Why is that, do you think?
I have stopped trying to guess. I mean, at the end of the day, it's fear. But what it's a fear of how their family is going to react, fear of losing endorsement deals, fear of being shot in a parking lot. I have no idea. And I have no idea why someone would be afraid today. Given how many athletes at lower levels have come out and been totally embraced. So I can't speak for them. Everybody has a different reason. There is not a silver bullet that says, oh, well, this is why all athletes don't come out. It's just a mystery.
Right. And you had a wonderful piece from the Super Bowl where you talked to several players, and I believe it was 8 that said they would welcome having a gay teammate or have no problem with having a gay teammate.
I mean, you have to search far and wide to find someone who would tell you publicly that they would reject a gay teammate.
True.
So there's that.
Right.
So there's that. But B, someone who would even think it. We have this idea in our heads that professional athletes are Neanderthals. But in 2012, there was a survey done of active NFL players, and they were asked, would you support marriage equality for gay people? And the percentage of NFL players at the time who said yes was somewhere in the, I think, mid to high 50s. That was higher than the general American population. And I have said for years that your average professional athlete is more accepting of LGBT people than your average American. For the most part, they've gone to college. They've experienced diversity. They're younger. They're in their late teens and early to mid 20s. And that generation is the acceptance is another level. So
right.
It's not a surprise anytime an athlete says that they support a gay teammate.
Right, and I didn't mean to frame the question as a surprise, just in that, the dreaded distraction word or whatever coaches or media members or want to throw out on that. And it doesn't seem like that's one of those things that you take it to its conclusion, you think about it for more than 5 seconds, and it just doesn't make sense. Although, aside as an excuse or a reason not to do it.
Again, I don't know. One thing that I know with athletes that we hear over and over again is that sports are steeped in this tradition of using homophobic language, and when a coach or a teammate uses a gay slur, they use it as a way to express displeasure, or what they don't mean is I hate gay people.
Mm-hmm.
But what the gay athlete says, what they hear is I hate gay people. So we hear this over and over again, where a teammate is just kind of shocked that the use of a gay slur might be offensive to a gay teammate, because that's not how they intended it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really an important power dynamic that exists in sports today, and that is definitely having an effect.
Yeah. Have you seen any kind of any kind of evolution, especially maybe since the Michael Sam story, or maybe devolution, or any change in how mainstream sports media looks and handles is such a bad word, I'm sorry, but handles gay issues in sports and LGBT issues surrounding sports? Has it gotten better, worse? Is it about the same?
It's about the same, and I'll tell you why. Pretty much every single interview that I do is steeped in negativity. So so every single interview is, why are athletes afraid? Why won't they come out? What challenges do they face? What should they be afraid of? What risks are they taking? All of this negativity, and that's how the media looks at it. I mean, this is pretty much what we've talked about, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
all the negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What we haven't talked about, and what nobody ever asked me about, is the positive, the incredible stories of total and utter embrace and acceptance. That the fact that in the last 10 years, we've written, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 stories of LGBT athletes at every level: football, basketball, Tennessee, Alabama, everywhere. And I only know of one that was negative. One. So we don't talk about that. And the media just has this constant drumbeat of, why are there no gay athletes? Fear, 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 fear. Instead of talking about what's really going on, athletes are coming out to total acceptance.
I apologize for the negative questions. And no, that's a great point and a great thing to think about as we kind of go forward in how we frame the issue and how we think about the issue, and not, media often skews negative for obvious reasons, kind of steeped in how news is made. But it's such a great point you bring up, and the stories that I've read on your site and others of acceptance are incredible, and they are heartwarming, and they're almost and the way it should be, really.
I don't mean that as an attack against you. I'm just telling you what I observe, and
it's fine.
It's just the same drumbeat with every single interviewer.
Right. So I know you got to get out of here in a few minutes, but I did want to ask you. I ask everybody, what's the best thing you've read lately?
The best thing I've read lately, boy, I don't know. God, I don't know. That's a really tough question. You stumped me.
All right, let me give you the best thing I've read lately, and then maybe give you time to think or spur something. Because I've just finished reading Shea Serrano's book, Basketball and Other Things. It came out, I think, toward the end of last year, and such just a fun book, great illustrations, great kind of approach to talking about the NBA and talking about basketball. I found myself just smiling a lot when I read it. It's a fun, fabulous, well-written book. Even if you're like a casual NBA fan, you'll find stuff in it that works for you. So I can recommend that one.
I guess the best, meaning most entertaining piece that I've read recently was something I think it was ESPN put out about the fractures within the Patriots organization. This is something that I've been saying for years, that Tom Brady is a bigger problem than he is a solution for the Patriots. I cannot believe they traded away the future,
right,
to keep Tom Brady around for another year or two. That's just insane. And so that piece was, I think there were journalistic issues with that piece, but as far as just pure entertainment, getting behind the scenes of the greatest NFL dynasty ever, that was pretty entertaining.
I remember that piece. That was, I think, the Seth Wickersham piece from last month.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Cyd, if people want to read your work and read more about what you and what you do, where can they find you? Where's the best place?
Well, outsports.com, obviously. I'm on Twitter at CYD Zeigler, but I tweet less and less because Twitter is just a cesspool of horribleness. So I just don't tweet that much anymore. But
Okay.
you can follow me there.
Excellent. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for talking about it.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.